Hi, David Ellenstein here, Artistic Director of North Coast Repertory Theater. Thank you for tuning in today to our theater conversations. If you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. That would help us out a lot. Thank you. Hi, it is my pleasure today to be joined by my friend and playwright Stephen Dietz, who is one of the more prolific writers in the American theater for the last more than 30 years. He has more than, I was trying to count him up, Stephen, more than I think 50 plays out there at this point. If you count the plays and the adaptations, it's beyond 50.
I think too many. I think too many is the word. Yes.
So, but not only are you one of the most prolific playwrights, you're also one of the most produced playwrights in the United States over the last 30 years. I mean,
Well,
everybody does your plays.
well, thank you. And I'm doubly grateful that your theater has done my plays and done them so beautifully. So thank you. Thanks for chatting with me.
Well, I was thinking, you know, I have been personally associated with 6 of your plays.
Wow.
Which
Okay.
is amazing. Go back to The Usual Suspects,
Yeah.
which Private Eyes,
Yes.
and then Dracula, the original production of your first Dracula, because I noticed you now have done a second Dracula.
Yeah.
We could talk about in a second. And then at North Coast Rep, we did the Dracula again. And then we did Becky's New Car, and we did This Random World, and we did Bloomsday.
Oh, God bless you. That's so nice of you.
Well, I mean, I do it because you're my friend, but more I do it because they're good plays.
Well,
And I know my audience is going to enjoy them, and they continue to enjoy them. So how did you become a playwright? I mean, were you an actor first? Were you a director first? Or were you always a playwright?
No, I was not always a playwright. I didn't even know really that playwrights walked the earth. I didn't really know there was that was something you could do. I didn't have any theater in my upbringing. I had a fantastic upbringing. My dad was a railroad conductor. I played a lot of baseball and had a great childhood in Denver, Colorado. But I saw my first play in high school, and then kind of fell in with that theater crowd in high school. So part of me was I was an athlete in high school, but then the other part of me was hanging out with the theater people. And I got smitten with just the world of it. I got cast in some plays because I could remember lines and I had a loud voice. I was really not a very good actor, but the bar, as you might know, at some places was fairly low, and I met the low bar to be a high school actor. A buddy of mine, no one in my family had gone to college, and I followed a buddy of mine up to the University of Northern Colorado in Greeley, Colorado, he was going to be a theater major. He then changed his mind and didn't go, but there I was suddenly up at UNC and signing up for theater classes. And it was really in college that I again got cast in some plays, but I started seeing more work. I was still so protected. If I think back on it now, when I teach college students, I realize, oh, they are so much more knowledgeable, and some of that's social media, but some of it's they are so much more knowledgeable about like what's going on in the world or the field. So I really still had never given any thought that somebody actually writes the plays. But then while I was in college, I got interested in directing, and then as I got out of college, a lot of the directing work I got, mainly at the Playwrights Center in Minneapolis, turned out to be the directing of new plays. And so I sort of came in the back door that way, and I worked as a director, as you have, on a lot of new plays while they were still being developed. And that was sort of my grad school. I never took a playwriting class, but as you know, that in the room tutelage of watching really good writers revise their plays, and I got to, stand there as their director, that lit a fire under me as a writer. And then I wrote some plays and people took chances on them.
Yeah, and so many interesting plays, and you've I wanted to ask you, because so many of your plays, especially some of the more recent ones, deal with time.
Yeah.
And deal with different aspects of time and looking at it. What got you, was that a conscious decision, or?
Well, I would love to think it was conscious. I mean, ironically, the very fact that my dad was a railroad conductor, you know, and they say that basically the railroads created time. You know, there were different times in different parts of the countries until the Transcontinental Railroad, and time was enshrined as a unit of measurement. And as obtuse as that sounds, it's very aware that I'm very aware that I grew up with this notion of formulating all events in what time do they take place in our lives, how duration, sequence, until finally I started one of the key classes I started teaching to grad students at UT Austin was a class called Time as a Narrative Strategy. And I was taking plays that I bet plays that you know well, plays like Betrayal, plays like Cloud Nine, 3 Days of Rain, Stop Kiss, that reconfigure time to suit narrative purposes. I started teaching that, and I'd already played with that in plays of mine that you know. But then as soon as I started teaching it, I found language. The great thing about teaching is that it makes you find language for what you think you know. I suddenly needed to have language for how time takes place in the story of characters' lives versus how I reconfigure it to happen in the play. And therefore, of course, you get plays like This Random World and Bloomsday. So maybe I would have written those plays, David, or written them in the same way if I hadn't taken this sort of deep dive into time. But I'm not sure. It's now really one of the fundamental things that I think about. And so much of teaching, and I suspect you likely have taught, you're a very good actor. I bet you've taught acting. I don't know this about you, but one of the main things you're talking about when you're teaching playwriting is finding what the Greeks called the kairos moments for the characters. So two different kinds of time: chronos, tick, tick, tick on our watch, and then kairos, where it's the names the Greeks gave to those threshold moments in your life. The moment after this moment, everything's going to be different. And so much of teaching playwriting is finding for each character, what are the kairos moments? What are the threshold moments? What are the opportune moments? And then trying to situate the play. I mean, this is Shakespeare and Molière and Chekhov and everything. Trying to situate the play atop those moments. Once I began thinking that way, I think the plays of mine were destined to change.
So you've covered all kinds of subject matter, from classical adaptations to very contemporary things. And your characters, the ones that you create, tend to be very human, very flawed, but usually good-hearted and not necessarily archetypical. Yeah. And I'm wondering, beyond each play and what you hope each play creates, which is a great evening in the theater that the audience takes away whatever it is you're after for that specific play, yeah. Is there an overall ethos you want your plays to create? Or is that not something that you think about?
If I think of it, it's quieter than that. It kind of is in the groundwater. I appreciate this question, and I appreciate, and I struggle with the question that we get asked by audiences sometimes, of like, what do you want the audience to take away from this play? That's always a complicated question for me, because it assumes intention. It assumes that I can articulate my intention, and it assumes that I can translate it and transmit it cleanly, and it sort of takes the audience out of the equation, because I'm not a drive-through. I am a conjurer, and so I am going to conjure a love affair in Bloomsday. Frankly, I'm going to conjure a love affair in Becky's New Car, and what are the various things we conjure. And then I'm going to hope that that's the blueprint for some emotional work or delight or something that the audience does. In terms of the ethos, I would say perhaps we write the plays that we wish to see. I love to be reminded of a human being's capacity for complexity, for complication. I love a good archetype, or even like a cliche character, like, oh, that's the crazy neighbor. But what I will really love about the crazy neighbor is when he or she does that thing that any other crazy neighbor never does, or that you've never seen them do. That level of complexity, and not consistency. I mean, I can't name a great fundamental character in theater history that is consistent. I think if you and I made a list of the great characters, the great roles you played, I suspect one unifying aspect, whether it's Willy Loman or Blanche Dubois or Prince Hal or whatever, is going to be complexity, the thing we don't expect. So I feel like I'm closest to the writer I want to be when I give you someone you can relate to, or at least want to watch, and then I twist, turn something and show some part of them that you didn't expect. Because I would like to believe that's like me. I am carrying a bundle of complexities through my day. I may only be presenting the sliver that this group of people wants to see.
Yeah. So your plays have been produced all over this country. In fact, I was looking down the list to refresh myself before we talked, and so many of them have been done so often. But I was noticing only a couple of them have been done in New York.
Yeah.
And Off-Broadway. But why do you think you're, I mean, I know you're not in New York. You're not part of that whole network. But
No.
Why do you think New York has shied away from producing more of your plays? I mean, I actually don't understand why, because I think there's a whole bunch of them that would do really well in New York. But why do you think that is?
Oh man, David, that's a big question, and it used to be a question that bugged me and troubled me more, quite honestly, than it does now. I'm still just as competitive, and I'm just as envious, and I champion my friends who have success in New York. Some of it is the trajectory my life took, that I was generating plays out of Minneapolis and Seattle and Arizona and Milwaukee, and not out of New York. Some of it is, I think that, and maybe this would be different if I started writing plays now, that once a play had a certain track record at regional theaters, I have in my career encountered very, very well-known artistic directors whose names I won't say, but who you know, in New York, basically saying, well, the very fact that those plays of yours are popular with all those people in regional theaters means they're not smart enough for New York, or they're not good enough for New York, or they are not mean enough. I've been told your plays aren't mean enough. Now, I want to clarify. That's a couple people talking about a lot of plays I've written. I actually think the New York theater is dynamic. I think there's a new group of artistic directors that are fantastic. But I think do I think I've written play? I would hold up, I basically, like, you pick 5 of your plays, whoever you are, a New York playwright, I'll pick 5 of my plays, and I will very proudly stand with my 5 plays. But I hesitate even saying that, because it creates this narrative of playwrights trying to compete with other playwrights. All we're really competing with is the art form,
right,
to try to make the work. And the last thing I will say, probably the reason we have a nice house and I'm in this nice studio, is that because my plays happened in regional theaters, my plays had a life.
right.
As opposed to, if that first production didn't work, I'd maybe have 3 or 4 other productions. Where if that had been in New York, as you well know, I would not have, plays would not have been given a second chance. So I really, most of the success of my career is the fact that, ironically, my plays avoided the fate of that one and done scenario.
Right, right. So, is there a play that comes to your mind of yours where you think it didn't get the exposure or the exploration that you wish it had? Is there one that kind of that got done? Because I think all of your plays have been produced, but is there one that didn't get that fourth and fifth and sixth productions that really explored the underbelly of it in a way that you wished it?
Wow.
Does one come to
And I should say not all the plays have been produced. I've been very lucky. Most all of them have. But I've certainly written commissions that didn't get produced. And I just to my right here, there's a whole shelf of things I'm working on in various stages. I have a play that I have a play that I don't. It's not even really one of my favorite plays, if we're being really honest. But I think it is one of the most caustically honest plays I've written. It's a play called Rancho Mirage. It's a play about, and it had a little rolling world premiere, and it was done 2 or 3 times. It got some nice reviews. It got some vicious reviews. It's essentially 3 groups of friends and a dinner party that goes terribly wrong. I've written more ambitious plays. I've written, frankly, probably more maybe theatrically inventive plays. But it was a play that I was very surprised didn't, as I am with Becky's New Car, frankly, which is probably now, that and BLOOMSDAY are probably now by far my most produced plays. But Rancho Mirage was a play that I kind of thought, well, God, this is funny and humane and dark in places, and it's about people's lives in this moment. That kind of surprised me. But as my wife would say, yeah, but then you just wrote the next play.
You're going to send it to me, right, Stephen?
I will send it to you. It's published. And I'm, I just premiered this new thriller in January, and as we were saying before, January seems like a long time ago, right, in the middle of what we're living in. And I'm hopeful. It's a play called How a Boy Falls, and it's a bit of a psychological thriller. And in my mind, it seems like, well, that maybe should find a lot of homes. But I guess I've done this long enough to realize if I wouldn't start a new play if I thought there had to be some promissory note. Well, you'll be guaranteed X number of productions, and so it'll be worth the time you work on this play. I think that's very difficult to be a playwright and live with that. So instead, I basically say, I want to get to the end of this scene, this act, and send it to hopefully some sympathetic artistic director.
So I met you in the mid '90s when we worked on Usual Suspects, which couldn't be called that because a movie came out. But at that point, you had already had a fair amount of success, and I'm thinking probably mostly of Lonely Planet, which was probably the one that really kind of put you on the map. Would you agree with that?
That and God's Country. God's Country was 88, and Lonely Planet was like 94. Yeah, Lonely Planet and that play went to New York, and yeah, definitely.
Was that a seminal play? What would you say is a play that like made you go, you know what, I'm in this for the long haul and I'm good at this? Yeah,
that's a really great question. 2 plays in a row. A play called 10 November I wrote in 1987. 10 November is the date on which the ore carrier Edmund Fitzgerald sank on Lake Superior in 1975. So I wrote a play called 10 November. It was done around the Great Lakes. I directed it in LA at the old LA Theater Center many years ago. But that play cracked open my notion. I suspect you've had directing moments like this. It just suddenly cracked open my notion of how a play could be made, how a play could be structured. It had beautiful music by a composer named Eric Peltonini. And that was the play right before God's Country, which was, again, a big breakthrough play for me. And those were big canvas, political, very theatrical plays. I still didn't know how to make a story. And so the downside of those plays, well, the upside of those plays is that I kept a lot of balls in the air. The downside of those plays was that the story maker in me, I had theater craft. I didn't have story craft yet. Lonely Planet, a play right before it called Halcyon Days, about the U.S. invasion of Grenada. Those were plays that I started, I think, to teach myself or begin my apprenticeship in this now, 40-year quest to be a story maker. And then Lonely Planet definitely was, it won awards, and it went to New York, and that was, after that my work was not what plays, it wasn't clear to me what I needed to write next, but it was clear to me that this was a huge arena, and I wanted to explore as many corners of it as I possibly could.
So your wife, Allison Gregory, is also a playwright?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And
very good.
How has that been interesting to have two playwrights? Has it been Dashiell Hammett and Lillian Hellman?
Oh my God.
What's it like to have two playwrights in the house?
I don't think we drink enough to be those people. But during this pandemic, I'm doing my best with the beer in my fridge. But it's fantastic, actually. This question should actually probably go to our 19 and 20-year-old children who say, like, what was it possibly like being raised by two playwrights? The upside is that we work very, very differently. Allison would, I think, describe herself to you as a much more intuitive writer. I'm more of a structuralist when I write. But the great thing is that we can read each other. Hopefully we all learn in our marriages to read our spouse as they, at least at the pace at which they learn to read us. But I can sort of tell when she can sort of tell when I'm in crunch time on a play or a revision, just by osmosis. And I can sort of tell that with her. We're good about protecting each other's time. And then we're really good about, and this is something I desperately enjoy, sharing, we don't share daily pages or anything like that, but she just finished the first act of a play a couple days ago, and she came and sat here in my studio, and we got to have like a note session on her play. And it was fantastic. So we're definitely each other's first reader, and we're candid and we're supportive, but we'll call each other because we also know each other's tricks.
That's great.
It's pretty exciting.
I'm so grateful to you to sharing this with our audience because my audience has loved your plays that we've done here, and hopefully we'll be doing a bunch more. And I finally got out here to see Bloomsday, and hopefully if we do another one, we'll get you out here for a longer period of time, which would be
I would
awesome.
love that. It means the world to me to talk with you and work with you. And I also just hope your audiences know what important work you're doing and what important work they are doing by being audiences to theater, not only in this time, but anytime.
Right. Well, great to talk to you this way, Stephen, and next time in person, I hope.
Likewise. Thank you, David. Be well. Bye-bye.